Paradise Creations members, we are continuing our fascinating discussion with Ralph Ellis. We are talking about Jesus, or King Jesus, and the Arthurian legend, how these are connected. We've been talking about some of the background in our first segment, and in this next one we're going to continue the story and see how it develops, and leading us up to King Arthur, of course. When we finished off, we were just talking about the crucifixion of Jesus, the reverse miracle, and basically what happened to the two characters, and I guess the trial of Jesus, Ralph, would be a good place then to start things off on in this segment.
Yes, indeed. So this was the trial, effectively, between Jesus and Vespasian. So Jesus was brought before Vespasian, as we've discussed, bruised and bloodied and beaten, having just been on the cross. He was brought down to Alexandria, put in front of Vespasian, and was forced to confer the kingship, effectively, to confer the oracle on Vespasian, so that Vespasian could become emperor of Rome, and not Jesus himself. So he was doing quite a favor, in a way, for Vespasian, although under duress, of course. He didn't have much choice in this. And the question then becomes, what does Vespasian do next? You know, they've had this rather damaging revolution on the eastern borders of the empire. There's been mayhem. They've lost a lot of soldiers. They had to send 3 or 4 legions down to Judea to sort out the situation. Vespasian has managed to become emperor, and he's left with a destroyed Jerusalem, scattered army of Jesus, and a number of captives who include most of the leaders of the Jewish revolt, including Jesus himself, of course. So what does he do with them?
Yeah.
Well, what does, there was no Geneva Convention in these days. You know, if you read the text about most of these revolts and uprisings, normally just all of the adversaries are normally just put to death. That was fairly standard, basically. But Vespasian couldn't do this because Jesus was rather special, as we've been discussing. He was an anointed prince of Rome, of Egypt, and of Persia as well. He had a number of influential backers, and one of those influential backers was Berenice, Queen Berenice of Judea, the sister wife of Agrippa II. Now, as it happens, Berenice had just, in inverted commas, married Titus, who was the son of Vespasian. So, effectively, Jesus was the best friend and client, as it were. She was the best supporter of Vespasian's daughter-in-law. So it's very difficult to go around executing your daughter-in-law's favorite prince.
Right.
So I think Vespasian found himself in a very difficult position. He couldn't execute this bruised and blooded King Jesus, because Berenice would get very upset. She was one of his primary supporters. She had also recently, according to Josephus, actually managed to get him out of prison from Vespasian through a large bribe. Earlier in the campaign, she had already managed to buy his freedom only a couple of years before. So she was obviously a great supporter. So Vespasian was not in a position to execute King Jesus. So what do you do with him? What do you do with the other leaders of this revolution?
Well, I guess...
I think that he was sent into exile.
Okay.
Which is the next logical thing.
Mm.
And the question is, where did he go to?
Yep.
Well, this was a revolution that was in Judea, of course, and the obvious place to send him would be the opposite end of the empire.
Right.
And the opposite end of the empire in this era, this is AD 70, the opposite end of the empire was actually Great Britain, or England, one would say.
Right.
And that's, I believe, where he was sent.
And, I mean, we could put this in a little bit more modern context, I guess, and ask ourselves, much the same way, England actually did use Australia as a prison colony, right?
It did indeed. Where do you send, revolutionaries? You send them as far away as possible. I mean,
right.
We did this also with Napoleon.
Sure.
Napoleon was sent into exile on Elba.
Yeah.
And that just simply wasn't far enough away.
It never seems to be. They always regroup down there and build up their armies again,
And he started a complete new war.
Right.
So they got that completely wrong. So after his defeat at Waterloo, they had to send him as far away as possible, which ended up as the, not Ascension Islands, it's the next one further down, which I can't remember the name of for the minute. Anyway, there's an island way down in the South Atlantic.
Okay.
And he was sent there for his exile, and there was going to be no way back from that particular exile.
Okay.
They did exactly the same. Send him away as far as you can. And in Roman terms, as far away as you can within the Roman Empire was England.
England, yeah. So, do you know if at the time when was he sent, when he still was injured, or had he recuperated? Did he have a lot of people and even armies with him? What was going on there?
Well, he had recuperated, but I think he was still injured, and I think he might have been, in fact, re-injured as well, because there is a problem with sending away a king or a prince, in that they are still fertile.
Right. So he was...
And you don't want lots and lots of new King Jesuses running around in your place of exile.
Right. So they...
So they castrated him.
Hmm.
And we know this because we now start to blend in some of the elements of Arthurian legend. So now we transfer our attention across the empire, to the opposite end of the empire, to what was going on in England at the time. Now, England had only just been settled. The invasion, the second invasion as it happens, was in AD 43, I think it was, under Tiberius. Hope I've got that correct. And Vespasian had already been there. He knew the place. Vespasian was one of the army commanders in charge of subduing England some years before. Before he became emperor, of course, before the Jewish War. So he was quite familiar with the place. And they had just reached out to northwest England, and just previously they had the big battle with the Druids and so on, and they wiped out all the Druid priests and all that sort of business.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of Vespasian's reign, so this is the early 70s AD, they decided to build a new fortress. But this was a very strange fortress, because they built it in the middle of nowhere. Now, obviously, a fortress is built to dominate an area.
Right.
You don't hide fortresses away in the middle of nowhere. But this one was hidden right on the northwest coast, behind marshes and forests, literally in the middle of nowhere. And also, it was bigger than all of the other fortresses. And it was made of stone, not just wood. And you have to ask yourself, why? What was this? Nobody, if you read the historical accounts and the archaeologists' accounts, they've got no idea why this fortress was put there. Okay. And this was Fortress Diwa, and today it's called Chester.
Chester, okay.
Yeah, so that's near Manchester. People who are not sure of the location.
Right.
And it's on the coast. Now, if you look at a map today, it looks like a good location, but this was all marshland, so this fortress was actually stuck on a rocky knoll surrounded by marshland. and an estuary for the River Dee. It was not a good location to put a fortress. And the other problem was that within this fortress, the archaeologists found a very, very strange temple. Well, they're not even sure if it was a temple, but quite obvious to me it was a temple.
Mm-hmm.
That was fully made in stone when all of these fortresses and everything within them was actually made of wood. So this was a very, very special building. And it was built on the shape of the symbol of Pisces.
Symbol of Pisces?
Yeah. It was a Piscean temple.
Right.
Now, who in this era would want a Piscean temple? Who was the fisherman?
Well, Jesus.
Whose church had the symbol of Pisces as its primary symbol?
Right, right.
Christianity.
Of course, of course.
Who revered, because this was not just a symbol of Pisces, this was a temple of the zodiac. So who revered the zodiac in this era? Now, the zodiac wasn't really Roman. Okay, the Romans did have the zodiac, but it wasn't a primary component of their religious worship and their temple.
No. This goes way back to the more ancient world, yeah.
But the Romans never actually picked it up that strongly.
Okay.
If you go around the Roman temples, you don't see zodiacs everywhere.
Okay.
The place where you do see them is in Judea and Syria.
Mm.
If you go around modern Judea and Syria, there's been quite a number of excavations, obviously, in recent years. And the archaeologists there have found 6 synagogues dating from the 1st century up to the 5th century AD.
Mm-hmm.
And much to the horror of the Orthodox Jews, every single one of these synagogues has a
zodiac.
Yeah. as being the primary symbol.
Well, if you know the background story, I mean, this is obviously not a big shocker. We know that this is astrotheology behind this, but yeah, please go ahead. I know what you're saying.
Well, it certainly was to the Orthodox Jews, of course.
Sure.
This was not a part of Orthodox Judaism as far as
mm-hmm.
And so they keep turning around and saying, these aren't synagogues. And the archaeologists saying, yes, they are.
Yeah.
They're dedicated as synagogues. That's what it says on, the mosaics.
Of course, yeah.
So quite obviously within Judaism, early Christo-Judaism, the zodiac was a primary component. And we know that because I presume your listeners are conversant with procession.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
The zodiac. And I think we talked about this before, where Jesus was born as a Lamb of God. So he was born under Aries.
Yeah.
And he became a fisher of men. So he then became a follower of Pisces.
Exactly.
And of course, within procession, as the constellations move, it just so happens that in AD 10-ish, thereabouts, the constellation of Aries faded and the constellation of Pisces became dominant.
Yeah.
So that start, and these changes in the sign of the zodiac are known as the Great Year. It's known as the Great Year because they last about 2,200 years. So this is a very long year.
Mm.
And so at the age of the new Piscean Great Year started in about AD 10. And this is why Jesus became
associated with this.
Yes, associated with the sign of Pisces.
It's the leader of the next age, basically.
Yes, he was the leader of the next age. This is why they were expecting a new leader or king or Messiah to come from the east. Because at the start of the Great Year was always a great epoch